Where am I? If you think I'm in Japan, you're kinda sorta right. I'm actually in LA's Little Tokyo to have a good lunch and in honor of today's show, a $250 Seiko versus a $4,500 Grand Seiko. Is the Grand Seiko worth it at 20 times the cost of a regular Seiko? Let's find out. Hi everyone, today I'm drinking Olympia's new Little Buddy Espresso Blend. This stuff is really good. Cheers. Okay, we're fresh off election night from the first Viewer's Choice Awards for favorite YouTube watch channel. So thanks again to everyone who came out and supported their favorite watch channel. You guys really came out and voted a lot. Now we're rolling right into the Seiko SNKN 41 versus the Grand Seiko SBGR 097. Yes, I know right away. How does this seem like a fair battle? Because the Seiko is fighting quite a few levels above its weight class. But let's give it a try. Don't sleep on Seiko because they're both made by Seiko. So is this Grand Seiko at nearly 20 times more expensive than this Seiko worth it? Well, there's not a real simple answer for that. If your only intention to wear a watch is to tell the time, then of course the answer is a simple no. But a watch is not a necessity for us anymore. We all can tell the time because we all have a smartphone or a tablet or we have access to a computer. The time is all around for us. And I can't remember the last time someone asked me for the time. So when we wear a watch today, it's more out of a status symbol or out of fashion. Now let's take a look at some pictures of today's rock stars. The person that would wear a $250 or under $200 watch such as this Seiko would be someone who really doesn't care about a status symbol or doesn't appreciate watches as deeply as some of us do. But if you're watching this video, you're probably more advanced than the average watch person. So you might wear this regular Seiko to mow the lawn, to play with your dog, to wash your car because you simply don't care. For under a couple $100, you can treat it any way you want. And if you compare this to the Grand Seiko here, one of the arguments could be that, you know, for 20 times the cost, I could just break this, lose this, and don't care about this. Because I can not care about this watch 20 times before I paid the cost of one Grand Seiko, which would be true. But if you are a watch enthusiast who enjoys all the dedication, commitment, and details that go into a watch, then the Grand Seiko is for you. And of course, if your financial situation allows you to get a Grand Seiko. The casual observer is not going to be able to tell the difference between a Grand Seiko and a Seiko. After all, they both bear the Seiko branding across the top. It's only underneath here that you can see the GS Grand Seiko. But the eyes are going to be drawn across the top and both are branded with the Seiko name. For those of you that have always complained about the Grand Seiko not being at the top, you might take joy knowing that the future direction of Grand Seiko might be headed where the GS Grand Seiko branding is across the top. As you can see some of the pictures here, Grand Seiko is now across the top. The fit and finishing on both of these watches, on the Grand Seiko and the Seiko, are clearly different and it's quite evident. But again, the casual observer isn't going to notice that. Only you will. So you have to be really confident in yourself to appreciate the subtle details and the nuances that go into the Grand Seiko versus the regular Seiko. What you're getting with the regular Seiko, in this case the SNKN 41, is a really nice timepiece. It's a really solidly built watch. I can't really poke any holes in this watch and the build quality. I'm only able to compare it to the Grand Seiko, and when I do that, yes, the details are evident. But I don't have the normal or the average eye for a watch. Watches are one of my passions, and I consider myself to be a watch enthusiast. More a watch enthusiast than a watch expert. And I can pick up the differences on a Grand Seiko versus this Seiko. Still, this Seiko has really impressed me. The Seiko beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, and the Grand Seiko beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour. And the sweeping seconds hands is when you can really tell the difference here. It's just so much smoother on the Grand Seiko. If you're one who loves your Seiko SNKN 41 or any Seiko, you should, because you're getting a really well-made watch. This watch goes for about $250, but I think this is really undervalued. This watch is easily worth 2 or 3 times more than that. So you're really getting a really great value for the regular Seiko. This is not a flimsy watch at all. This movement is not made in Malaysia or China. This, I believe, is a Japanese movement. And the Recraft series, it's a really nice watch. It's one of the most, I think, undervalued watches there are, because for what you're getting for this price, this is a tremendous bang for buck. Because the price difference on a Grand Seiko is about 20 times more expensive as this Seiko, would I want 20 of these Seikos or similar Seikos versus one Grand Seiko? The answer is no. No, I wouldn't. I don't need 20 watches. And if you're financially able to, I do recommend the Grand Seiko highly. I've had this watch for a few months now, and I can honestly say that I appreciate my Grand Seiko more so now than I did when I first got it. I wear this watch almost every day. I actually, between this and my Rolex DJ, I really wear those watches a lot. And I really appreciate the history and the heritage of the Grand Seiko, especially what it took Grand Seiko to be where they are today. That always plays in my mind whenever I see this watch, and it makes owning this watch so much more enjoyable. So there are differences between the Grand Seiko and the Seiko. But if you didn't compare the regular Seiko to a Grand Seiko, even if you did, you should really appreciate the Seiko, because this is a really well-made watch. This is just a solidly built watch, and in the short period of time that I've had this watch, I've really learned to appreciate this watch a lot. In fact, I would actually wear the one that I showed you earlier with that green dial. I only bought this one because it's more similar to my Grand Seiko than that green one. Let's talk about the fit and finishing on this Seiko. It has a brushed and polished finish. It's quite nice. It's really indistinguishable from the Grand Seiko. Let me hold up another picture of this. But where the Grand Seiko really shines is on the polished finish. Let me try to get a close-up on. You can get an idea of this. I don't think it's going to come through on camera. But what I can say is that the finishing on the Grand Seiko, the polished finishing, is far superior to this Seiko. I think when I saw this at first, if I never handled or got to experience a Grand Seiko in person, this would be more than fine. This polished finishing is just as good as any other watch there is, but it's a huge difference. It's a night and day difference. The Grand Seiko is just so far more superior than the regular Seiko in this polished finishing. Grand Seiko uses the Zaratsu finishing, which is what they use for their special swords in polishing it. That is not what they use on a regular Seiko. Both models have the exhibition case back. I'll throw up some better pictures in this, but this is a Seiko SNKN 41 movement that they show, and this is my Grand Seiko's SBGR 097 movement. If you can see that, let me try to put them side by side here. Grand Seiko, Seiko SKN 41. Now, even though the Seiko uses an exhibition case back, this is not a movement that's worthy of an exhibition case back. There is not a lot to this movement. It's a very bland movement. It's just, to me, it doesn't need this exhibition case back. I mean, to be fair, even the Rolex 3135 movement is not an attractive movement, so Rolex is wise not to use an exhibition case back. Totally the opposite with the Grand Seiko. Now let's look at the clasp here on the clasp on the Seiko. The clasp right here, you can see Seiko here, which is engraved on the clasp there, which is fine. It's a nice, there isn't anything wrong with that. But now let's compare this detail with the Grand Seiko. You see the clasp here? I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera here, but the GS in here, this is neither stamped nor engraved. This is what this steel started off as right here, and then from there they carved all the way around it. So this stays on top, and they carved all the way around it for the detail finishing on this. This is a lot more work that went into the Grand Seiko. The Grand Seiko is also handmade. So even though both clasps looks kind of similar, the Grand Seiko is more of a 3D effect because of all the hand carving that went into it to create this versus the simple engraving. Now in terms of build quality on the Seiko, this is a well-built watch. There isn't any, look at the bracelet, there isn't any real flimsiness to it. It shakes a little bit, but that's a Japanese style of bracelet. It's not a stiff bracelet. It's not rigid like this. They allow it to give some flexibility. Now let's compare that with the Grand Seiko's bracelet. The Grand Seiko moves very little, and still while being flexible, a little. I'm trying to move it as much as I can. I'm trying to shake it. A lot less than the Seiko bracelet. The Seiko bracelet also uses screws on either side of the bracelet, as we can see here. That's the same as the Grand Seiko. The Grand Seiko uses screws on either side of the bracelet. This is a very solidly built watch. I'm very impressed by the Seiko's build. This is not a flimsy watch. This is not a light or a feather light watch. This watch has a lot of heft and substance to it. This, I do enjoy this watch, this Seiko. Let's compare the dials on both watches. The Seiko, the Grand Seiko. They're both a very similar blue, right? Let me spend some time talking about the Grand Seiko dial. One of the biggest differences, or where the Grand Seiko shines, is in its dial. Although they're both blue, the levels of complexity that went into this Grand Seiko dial is like, it's almost like any other, not like any other dial I've ever seen. Certainly, this Seiko is not on the Grand Seiko's level in terms of the dial. This is this regular Seiko here, it has a nice sunburst blue. It's a very attractive dial. Don't get me wrong. But the Grand Seiko dial is more than just blue. I don't know if you can, I'm going to put up some close-up pictures of it. But it has the GS embedded throughout the dial, and it's really not noticeable unless you want to see it or under certain light conditions, which I really enjoy that. The casual observer that's noticing your watch will not see it. If you ask the casual observer what color each of these dials are, they will say blue, but nobody will say blue and it has those little the GS signs all over it. Nobody will pick that up but you. But this dial has so many different shades in different lighting. The dial looks almost like a sea blue or a really deep sky blue, and it's only in this lighting condition that you can see the GS throughout the dial. Compared to lesser lighting, the dial looks almost like a steel blue, steel gray color. And then in other lighting conditions, the dial looks almost like a black or a midnight blue, and it's a much darker color. I like those different dial looks depending on the different light conditions. Versus the Seiko, it remains this sunburst blue in any lighting conditions. So if you're someone who really enjoys and appreciates the complexities of a dial, you're going to really appreciate the Grand Seiko. But you may not have seen the levels of complexity that I'm talking about on other dials, because I haven't seen that from any of my watches in my collection or any other watches that the Grand Seiko brings. I think we're all familiar with Grand Seiko's famous snowflake dial, that gorgeous white snowflake dial. Grand Seikos are really known for their impeccable dials, and this Grand Seiko SBGR 097 is definitely right there. One of the cool features on this Seiko is that it has a day date, and the days of the week actually has a couple of different languages to choose from, but this also doesn't hack. Seiko doesn't list the plus or minus seconds a day in accuracy, but in the short time I've had this Seiko, I've been getting about plus 6 seconds a day, compared to the Grand Seiko, which is they listed as minus 3 seconds or plus 5 seconds a day. I've been getting now plus 1 second a day when worn on the wrist. Another difference between Seiko and Grand Seiko is everything with Grand Seiko is done in-house. Every material, every component is done in-house by Grand Seiko. So let's take a look at the boxes here between the Seiko box and a Grand Seiko box. Even though the Grand Seiko box is a lot larger, it lacks a special presentation that leads up to the watch. But with Grand Seiko, everything is done in-house. Even the box. The box is made in Japan versus China. So if you're someone who is able to and appreciate really fine watches, the Grand Seiko is the way to go. If you're someone that just wants to throw away their watches and you don't care, you don't want to worry about your watch, then obviously a watch like this Seiko will do. So there's really no correct answer for this, except more times than not, it really breaks down to whether you're financially able to choose a Grand Seiko over a Seiko. And so to me, if you're able to, the Grand Seiko is the way to go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you the next time.